The convoy rolled out just before dawn, engines rumbling like an old orchestra tuning up for a final performance. Sergeant James Callahan sat behind the wheel of the lead truck, his hands tight on the steering wheel, eyes scanning the horizon. This was supposed to be their last mission before heading home. The air was heavy with a strange mixture of excitement and unease. Everyone knew that last missions had a habit of going wrong. They had been in the desert for 8 long months, running supply lines through hostile territory, dodging roadside bombs, and enduring the blistering sun that baked the earth into something as hard as concrete. This final run was simple on paper: deliver a shipment of medical supplies to a forward operating base 2 hours away, then turn around and head back to the airfield for their flight home. But simplicity was a luxury that war rarely allowed. The convoy was made up of 5 trucks, each packed with supplies and soldiers. Private Lopez, barely 20, sat in the passenger seat next to Callahan, trying to mask his nervousness by talking about all the things he'd do when he got home. First, a giant cheeseburger, then a long shower, then seeing his mom. Callahan just nodded, letting the young man talk. He remembered being like that once, filling the silence with plans for the future, as if speaking them aloud could make them come true. The first hour passed without incident. The desert stretched endlessly, broken only by the occasional cluster of rocks or a withered bush. Dust trailed behind them like a ghost. Over the radio, Captain Reynolds' voice crackled, reminding everyone to keep eyes open. They were traveling along a route known for insurgent activity, and though intelligence suggested things had been quiet lately, quiet was sometimes just the calm before the storm. Halfway through the journey, the road narrowed between 2 rocky ridges. Callahan slowed the truck, instincts flaring. The place felt wrong, too still, too perfect for an ambush. He glanced at Lopez, who had stopped talking and was gripping his rifle. "Stay sharp," Callahan muttered. Then it happened. The world exploded in a thunderclap of heat and sound. The second truck in the convoy took the hit, an IED buried under the dirt ripping through the vehicle with brutal force. Shrapnel tore into the air, and flames erupted. The radio came alive with shouts and commands. Callahan slammed the brakes, heart pounding, scanning for movement in the ridges above. Gunfire echoed from the rocks, muzzle flashes glinting in the early light. The convoy returned fire, soldiers scrambling for cover behind the trucks. Lopez's hands shook as he fired out the passenger window, his face pale but determined. Callahan grabbed the radio, reporting their position and requesting immediate air support. Chaos ruled the next few minutes. The enemy was well hidden, their shots precise. One of their gunners, Corporal Ellis, went down with a wound to his shoulder, and Specialist Harper dragged him to cover behind the lead truck. Smoke from the burning vehicle filled the air, stinging eyes and throats. "Reynolds, what's the call?" Callahan barked into the radio. "Hold position and return fire until backup arrives," came the terse reply. Callahan knew holding meant more exposure, but retreating would leave the damaged truck and its wounded crew behind. There was no choice, they didn't leave their own. He spotted movement on the ridge, squeezed the trigger, and watched the figure vanish behind a rock. Minutes felt like hours. Then, faint at first but growing louder, the distinct roar of helicopter blades cut through the chaos. Air support swooped in, firing at the rocky ridges and scattering the attackers. In moments, the gunfire from the enemy side sputtered out and fell silent. When the dust settled, 2 of their trucks were damaged, 1 beyond repair. The medics worked quickly, stabilizing the wounded and loading them into the remaining vehicles. Callahan stood by the burning wreckage of the second truck, his face set in grim determination. This was supposed to be an easy run, a simple last mission before heading home, but war didn't care about promises. They had a decision to make: continue to the forward base or turn back. Reynolds, after a brief council with his sergeants, decided they would finish the mission. Those medical supplies were needed, and turning back would mean the ambush had been for nothing. Callahan climbed back into his truck, feeling the weight of that choice. The second half of the journey was tense. Everyone was on edge, scanning every ridge and shadow. Lopez was quieter now, his earlier enthusiasm gone. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Callahan thought about saying something reassuring, but the words felt hollow. Instead, he kept his eyes moving, searching for danger. When they finally rolled into the forward operating base, a wave of relief washed over the convoy. The medics on site rushed to unload the supplies, and the wounded were transferred for further treatment. The soldiers grabbed quick drinks of water, their uniforms streaked with dust and sweat. Reynolds gave them only 15 minutes before ordering them back onto the road. The sun was higher now, baking the trucks and shimmering off the sand. They took a different route for the return, hoping to avoid another ambush. It was a quieter ride this time, though the tension never left. Each mile brought them closer to the airfield, to the promise of home. Callahan thought about his wife, about the letter she'd sent last week telling him she'd painted the baby's room. She was 7 months along now. He pictured her smile, the way she always laughed at his bad jokes, and he felt the ache of missing her. As the airfield's gates came into view, a strange mix of emotions welled up in him: relief, exhaustion, and a lingering sadness for the ones who wouldn't be making the trip home. The men and women of the convoy parked their trucks in neat rows, stepping out into the dry heat one last time. They moved slower now, the adrenaline gone, replaced by the heavy weight of what they'd just survived. Lopez stood beside Callahan, watching the planes on the runway. "Guess we made it," he said softly. Callahan looked at him, at the dirt on his face, the tired set of his eyes, and nodded. "Yeah, we made it," but in the back of his mind, he knew that part of him was still out there on that dusty road between the ridges, hearing the echo of gunfire and the roar of helicopters. That was the thing about the last convoy home: it didn't always end when you crossed the gate. Some part of it stayed with you forever, a reminder of the cost of survival and the weight of leaving no one behind. The soldiers boarded the plane as the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of gold and red. Callahan took one last look at the horizon, the place that had tested them, scarred them, and, in its own harsh way, bound them together. Then he stepped inside, the hum of the engines promising a different kind of journey, one that led back to the lives they had left, and the hope that, this time, they could truly go home.